This is a recording of the April 17th, 2021 Coast Division virtual event, recorded at 9 a.m. Well, good morning. So this morning, this is our April 17th meeting. So really had three things today, just a couple of updates on the conventions and our return to normal committee. A great session. Jonathon and Fred, we were talking a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago on one of our meetings, and they both were talking about using servos and decided that was a really interesting topic to kind of have an initial discussion about. It's been really interesting. Some of the little e-clinics we've done have gotten a lot of views because they're really good introductions into things. And then finally, we'll just close with bring what you're modeling. So thanks again to Jonathon and Fred for that, and we'll get to them in a moment. So we had a return to normal committee meeting. We met on April 12th, last Monday. Great news, we had 9 volunteers come to the meeting. We agreed and we talked about it that our goal is to deliver a recommendation to the Coast Board and the membership for the structure of kind of future events. And this includes physical, virtual, and special events. So, what we realized is that physical and special events are highly intertwined, and there was a strong reaction from everyone that regardless of what we do in physical events, we want to have some form of virtual events available for the membership. As we talked about, what we agreed is one of the challenges with a problem like this is you can kind of just keep coming at the thing from different ways and it kind of bounces you back. So we agreed that we would break the process to look at this into 3 stages. What should we do for physical events? I've talked about this in the past. I'm not going to spend any time on it now, but we have some challenges to return to the way we used to do physical events with an auction at every event, et cetera. We've lost one of our facilities. So we're going to examine that first, and we're going to decide what we're going to recommend for physical events. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on virtual events. So once we've defined physical events, obviously the number of those and et cetera would define virtual events. And then the last thing we agreed is that after we've defined what the membership wants in terms of an auction process, if necessary, we'll look at developing new tools. The challenge is the current auction tools we use, I believe, are running on Windows XP, and it was a software implementation done in tools that are no longer supported by a member who's no longer available to support it. My fear was that we'd show up at an auction, something would have a glitch, and we literally couldn't have an auction. So that's basically the process we agreed on. That should happen over the next month or two. Probably won't anything happen for the next couple of weeks because of the convention. We spent a lot of time defining and discussing physical events in detail. What were the potential activities? We talked a bit about the physical locations within the divisions, where people are located. Chris, I had a conversation. Chris set up a meeting with all of the superintendents from the divisions and the PCR, and we had some discussions about challenges, et cetera. And one of the comments Chris made was that he had done an analysis of where the members were located, and there were kind of 3 distinct membership pockets in the kind of clear areas, kind of the East Bay, West Bay, and then Southern Bay area. But we also cover all the way down to Monterey, so we also have to think about that, as well as, of course, Hawaii. The conclusion we came to after talking through locations and locations and events, and had some really strong opinions, lots of different strong opinions about what we should do. The interesting thing is we came to the conclusion that what we need to do is prepare a membership survey for the Coast membership. So probably in about 2 or 3 weeks, you will get a survey. We'll get it out. Trying to figure out exactly the best way to do it. I kind of like tools like SurveyMonkey. We'll figure out what's a reasonable, cost-effective way to do that. But really to find out, what kind of activities do members prefer? And from a location perspective, do we have preference in location? So when that comes out, it's going to be really important for everyone to participate and get their input in, so we get a real clear view of what are the preferences of the membership. Very quickly, a convention update. You notice up at the right, the Sugar Pine Centennial, our PCR convention, is now global. I'll throw the registration in the chat after I get done here. You can find it really simply, PCR convention. Both the NMRA and the PCR will now be virtual events. What's happened is, after the national NMRA conference became a virtual event, Seth really focused on stepping up and getting that really organized. And so what happened is he put a team together to kind of get that organized, including the TSG folks, John and Sid over at TSG. What happened was when the PCR became a virtual event, we kind of turned and said, this is a great place to just do a test bed run. Let's see how it works. So what we're trying to do is do everything in the PCR like we're going to do at the National in July as kind of a learning exercise. So one of the things that's great is if you come to this, great, looking for feedback, looking for people to tell us what the experience was like so we can change it. Quite frankly, we've changed a number of things we thought we would do one way over the last week and a half, 2 weeks as we prepare. We have another 3-hour dry run this afternoon with the whole team. So this is all the folks from the Daylight Division. And I think it's going to be really great. What we're doing is we're kind of changing the way a convention works. So we're going to have, and this will be for the PCR, when we get to the National, the clinic room will become 2 clinic rooms or tracks or something. But for the PCR, there will be a clinic room and what's called the main hall. The main hall is just a Zoom meeting. But Zoom has the capability of having these breakout rooms defined. And because this is a large room, you can define lots of breakout rooms. So a breakout room is somewhere you click on the screen and you go to a little meeting. So you can be in a meeting with 100 people and you can jump in a breakout room and there's only 2 of you. And you can have a large number, up to 100 breakout rooms in the main hall. So the idea is the main hall will open at 8 o'clock in the morning and it'll close at 10 o'clock at night. And so you can just go there and you can go to the breakouts. So I'll come back and talk about the breakouts a little bit more, but we're looking at OpSig breakout. One of the things I'd like to talk about maybe after we get done with Jonathon is the concept of a cool tools breakout. And breakouts is the idea it's there all day, but someone may say, I'm going to be a host of a discussion in the cool tool rooms about 3D printing at lunch. So lunch is from 12 to 12:30. So the idea is instead of at 12 to 12:30 just going and getting a sandwich, you go in the main hall, you go in the breakout for cool tools, and there's a place to have a discussion and ask questions and about 3D printing. The other side is the clinics. The clinics are in what's called a Zoom webinar. And the way to think about a Zoom webinar is really simple. It's a Zoom meeting that a bunch of people get to watch. So you're either in the meeting or you're watching the meeting. So almost everybody at the conference will be watching the meeting. And the way to think about this, it's no different than the clinic room you've gone to in every conference you've gone to. You walk into the room, at the front of the room, there's a table. The clinician and probably the introducer from the convention are there in the front of the room. You file in, you sit in chairs, and then the clinic goes. During the clinic, you sit, and at the end of the clinic, you have a chance to raise your hand and ask questions. So the big difference here is that there's a physical glass wall between the clinicians and the audience, because we know the audience occasionally throws things. So just think about it exactly the same way. So you'll come in, when you come in the morning, you'll come into this clinic room as what's called an attendee or in the audience, and you'll be able to watch the meeting, see it. It'll be prepared in a way that looks really good. And that's where all the clinics will be. Now, what you can do is there's actually a tool to ask questions. So not only do you have chat, so you can chat like we do in our meetings, but you can also ask specific questions. What's really cool, and this is where it starts to be, this is the differences between virtual versus physical. If you look at the PCR, almost all of the clinicians have pre-recorded their clinic talk. And that lets it be high quality, assures that you get the glitches out. In fact, John over at TSG, he recorded a clinic for the summer convention by Jack Burgess. And he said after he recorded the clinic, he went back and edited it. And he took about an hour and 2-minute recording, and it actually condensed down to about 46 minutes because he was able to take out things that were during that, there were pauses and things that really didn't add any value. So the idea is that 46-minute clip will play, and you'll be able to watch it. But if you see something and you have a question, you can type the question in. And during that clinic, that'll be at the National in July. It won't be at the PCR this time. Jack will actually be sitting there, and if you ask a question, he can type a response back to it because he'll be able to interact with you while the clinic's going. Then the clinic gets over, just like in the clinic, and now it's time for questions. He'll be able to answer both those written questions, but we also have the capability of allowing a question verbally. So we have a person you see called the producer. They can turn on somebody in the audience's ability to speak so they can ask a question and the clinician can respond. But you know what happens normally at a convention is the clinic gets done. It's 2 minutes before the next clinicians come in, you get kicked out and you go out in the hall and you have a conversation. The difference here is that going out in the hall conversation now moves over to the main hall. And you can think about the main hall as being that place you come into in the convention where the modular layouts are and there are a couple of exhibits and maybe a couple of vendors. Just imagine there are some tables there and each table is labeled with a name and those are the breakouts. So one of the breakouts will be the clinic goes on. So the idea is now when the clinic's done, for example, in the summer, Jack will go over to the clinic goes on to that breakout room and it's the same all day because it's sequenced. And if you were in the clinic and you have that question you really want to ask, you can go over and continue the conversation there. So the goal here is really to try to create a lot more of that interaction we have in conferences and, bringing railroaders together to talk about topics they're interested in. Just out of curiosity, does that sound interesting and different to folks?
Your question again?
Does it sound like it's interesting and good, something you'd be excited about?
I think it sounds like a good idea. The one that I'm not altogether sure about is I'm going to be giving a clinic and am I giving a virtual clinic from where I am right now, or am I going someplace where they're going to live photograph me? I don't understand.
So, and there's going to be for folks that are doing clinics in July, one of the things we're going to get out after the 24th. So understand, this is a teething process. I'm going to stop sharing because I want to see everybody. This is a great discussion. The feedback is just great. We've gone through a real teething process to figure out how to do this because it turns out you have to have somebody monitoring the Zoom stuff. You have to have somebody looking at questions and handling them. You have to have an MC, getting all the people together and getting all the processes right. We've also gone through the recordings. One of the things you're going to see, if you come to the one in on Saturday, the 24th, a week from today, there are different ways of doing your clinic. First thing is you can do your clinic live. There's nobody's saying you can't do a clinic live. If you want to do a clinic live, you can, quite frankly. If you got great bandwidth, you know what you're doing, perfect. The suggestion is that you pre-record your clinic. And the reason to do that is again, if you think about the process I went through, it advantages during the clinic, you can do Q&A and that. But beyond that, you avoid the technical glitches, right? You're in the middle of the clinic and God forbid, some backhoe down the street tears up the coax cable and it takes Comcast 4 hours to get your cable back, or your computer crashes. And I had my computer just before this meeting. I was doing some stuff and my computer, something was going on. My memory had gone up and I literally had to reboot my computer to get anything to work right. And that occasionally happens. So one of the advantages of recording is you can actually, avoid any of those glitches. The third advantage is you're not live. So if you say something, you say, no, wait a second, I kind of regret saying that. I'd like to say that differently. You can't always change it. So those are kind of the advantages of recording. So if you think about how to record, there are 3 ways of doing it. PowerPoint, if you use PowerPoint slides, PowerPoint allows you to do voice annotation. Quite frankly, we found a huge problem with that. The way that works is PowerPoint plays an audio file and then transitions the slides. And it's very, it's kind of like the slide changes and then there's a second and a half, 2 seconds, then you hear the voice talk for 10 seconds, and then there's a pause, the slide changes, and then the voice talks with the next thing. And each one, it becomes very broken up, quite frankly. If you have 5 slides, it probably works brilliantly because you talk for a long time in each slide. one of the guys, and you'll see this when you come to the convention, one of the guys had, I don't know, probably 60 slides, and or maybe not that many, but it can get very broken up. The other way to do it is there are a lot of tools you can use. You can use Audacity and record your voice. You can add in the slides later. I actually have Camtasia on my computer. Camtasia allows me to record my screen. I've done a lot of recording where it records your screen and you're talking, so you're in the PowerPoint, and it's actually just capturing the screen. The best way, I think, to do it, quite frankly, John from TSG has offered to record any of the clinics using Zoom. And it turns out that's a great way to do it. So what happens is literally you have a one-on-one Zoom meeting, and and you just record your clinic talking to John, essentially, and John's not paying any attention to you. I mean, and by the way, everybody's got to get used to the idea. I don't know if I've told you this story. I don't have the video picture. So does anybody remember Back to the Future? The first movie.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Marty gets sent back to the future. Remember, right before he got sent back, he videotaped what was going on at the mall, and he threw that in the car, and the camera came with him. And Marty comes in and he sees the professor, and he says, "Professor, I'm from 1985. I've been back to the future, the time machine you built." And the professor says, "Well, future boy, answer me one question, future boy." What was the question? Who was the president in 1985? And Marty goes, "Ronald Reagan." And the professor goes, "The actor?" And you can hear kind of that. And then they continue on the discussion. About 2 minutes later, Marty plugs in that JVC handheld, whatever it was, JVC-C camera, and shows him the video. And what was the professor's reaction? "Now I understand why your president is an actor." So guys, here's the thing to think about. If you're a clinician, we're all actors now.
Yep.
We're all actors on a stage. So one of the things you're going to get, for example, and Jesse, you're doing a great job. Great background. You know, when we see you, you get good lighting. You know, by the way, suggestions, folks, $25, $30, you can buy a ring light and a little stand on Amazon and get nice lighting for you. I don't have great lighting. I need to buy one. Because in many ways, we're all actors on a stage. This video stuff has turned us all into actors. So that's kind of, if you're a clinician, I think doing the Zoom meetings is probably a great way of doing it. And then what happens is John can edit it down into the MP4 that gets played in the meeting. And one of the other cool things about that is that the way Zoom works, if it's high resolution, it actually can record at 2K. So one of the things that John and I were talking about, the clinic he recorded of Jack is actually in 2K. So when you watch it, it's really high quality as well. So it'll be very high quality during the event. Cool. Well, I'm going to go back. I got a couple more slides, and I want to stop because I want to get into the real content we had here of the day. So anyway, that's kind of the idea. If you haven't registered, I'll put the link in a moment, and go ahead and register. It's free. And if you don't come all day, you can drop in the afternoon. You'll get a link that'll tell you there'll be 3 clinics rooms. There'll be one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening, and there'll be different Zoom addresses. But the main hall will be the same address all day. And you can always go to the main hall and ask. There'll be an information desk attendant in the main hall. And so if you go in there and ask, they can give you the link to come back over and go to the clinic. So this is the agenda. Really a lot of kind of interesting things, especially if you're interested in Sierra logging. I looked at Jeff's slides, and Jeff has just a huge number of pictures and interesting information. The Meet the Modeler, our own Earl Gerbavon will be there representing the Coast and the PCR as meeting the modeler and talking about a model he's built. Also, if you haven't ever seen Steve Rediker, next to the bottom, Steve is building the Hetchy Railroad, and he decided, because he couldn't find color pictures, that any colorization would actually be just a guess. So he's actually building his railroad in black and white. So the idea, right, it's very interesting. And by the way, I actually got the convention car. If you go to the site, Milton Sansusi built a handmade resin cast convention car, and I actually got mine. It's here in a box. And after that, for those who stay after, you can't see it, after we'll open it up and see it. It's a pretty cool convention car. So if you want to get a convention car, that's a good thing to go get. So with that, just if you're joining us and are not an NMRA member, please join. And I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to throw it over to Jonathan and Fred, and go ahead and let them discuss how they're using servos in modeling. And by the way, if you're not muted, please mute, and just to make it easy for everyone so we don't get any background noise. Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, let me get this out of the way. I discovered this morning. If any of you are KQED, there's this cute little article. It's a short read about the trains that went from San Francisco to Santa Cruz Boardwalk. It's a quick read. It's an interesting, enlightening story. So I can send the link if folks are interested. Okay, so Fred and I are going to walk through servos. We talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about them, and we got roped into doing a more deeper dive in that. Happy to do that. So I'm going to kick it off, kind of talk about what servos are. Fred's going to jump in and show some examples, and then I'll wrap it up with some more advanced Arduino-based stuff. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along, or hold them to the end. I'm fine either way. So what is a servo? And I actually
Jonathan, can you throw your slides into slideshow mode?
Sure. If I can figure out where is
maybe under view. Under view. There we
go. There it is. Like that? Well,
excellent. Thanks.
How's that? That's even better. Got the whole slide now. And let me get rid of the side layout if I can know. Well, it's not that much. Okay, so I have props. If you can look at the little video, and I can do this afterwards, they come in all different shapes and sizes. I've got little ones, and then there's big ones. So they're all types of different types of servos and sizes and strengths and all that. But what is a servo? It's basically a motor that's actually a closed loop mechanism. And so it has feedback in it, and I have another slide on that. But it's, in simple terms, a motor spins freely. A servo typically doesn't. It has a range of motion, and you can say, I want the servo or the position right here. The input is very simple. You got obviously your power, and then a control signal. And then you control it with a pulse width. Sounds complicated, but it really isn't. So what you basically have is you have your basic servo. It's got some gearing. And it has this feedback loop, and then you send in a signal, and it just does a comparison to make sure that they match. The output is compared through this simple comparator, and by adjusting your pulse width, you go from a position. So think of it, your pulse width is really setting a degree, and then the faster you change the pulse width, the faster the comparator is going to apply more power to the motor. It's going to move quicker until it gets to where it needs to be. It's simple as that. And basically your pulse width, a typical is 1.5 milliseconds. Sounds really complicated. It really isn't. There's a lot of products out there to help you do this simply. There are also another type of servo. They're continual rotation, and basically it takes out that resistor per se, or the potentiometer and comparator, and the pulse width actually turns the servo left or right, clockwise or counterclockwise, depending upon what your pulse width is, and then if you give like a 2 microsecond pulse width, it's kind of like neutral, saying, I'm going to stay exactly where I'm at. Most servos can be easily modified. I've modified a few to be continuous rotation. You take off 4 screws, you disconnect the servo, the resistor, you put the 4 screws back in, and now you're a continuous servo. And then, you have a different way of controlling motors and speed. The beauty about servos is low power, very easy, but high gear ratios, so a lot of power and torque with them. Okay, so how are they different? Well, DC motors or steppers, they spin free without limits. And stepper motors can hold the position, but you've got a lot of complex things you need to wire with them. That's outside the context of today's discussion. But the thing with motors is you have no positional information. You can maybe do an optical encoder to determine the RPMs, but you don't know really where the servo is or the motor arm is. With a servo, you always know exactly where it is. You know what pulse you're sending it, you know where it's at. And so with that, so what can you do with servos? So that's the basics of what a servo is, but what can you do with these things? A crossing gate. So you can automate, because it's a limited motion, you can control a gate up and down very easily. You can do wigwags, if you remember those. I've seen a couple of these where you can buy them as kit, or people have modified them themselves. I did a switch machine, a track switch machine. You can animate doors. A few years ago, I was at the narrow gauge convention up in Salt Lake, or yeah, I think not Salt Lake, Seattle, and somebody had used a servo to make a rocking chair. So it's just somebody on a rocking chair, and the servo was just moving the arm back and forth, and the chair was rocking. You can do it with figures too. So there's a lot of different ways you can use servos, because once again, it's a motor that you send a signal and tell it, which very simply tells it where to position itself at a slow rate, and then, you know, a lot of interesting things. So I'm going to turn it over to Fred and let Fred talk through some of his, what he's done with them.
Oh, good morning. Okay, I use a program offered by a company called POLOU, and they offer a free software program that you install on your computer, and you can get a servo and a control board and plug those in. And then there's a number of sliders on the first screen. There's a number of sliders you can, yeah, right up in there, right. And you can have them for each servo has its own control. So you can move the slider back and forth. I don't know if does mine show on that? No. Anyway, no matter. You can move it back and forth, and that operates the servo back and forth. If it's a continuous rotation servo, then the slider controls the speed at which the servo operates. So you can have, I think the smallest circuit board has 12 controlled 12 servos, and they go all the way up to 24 servos. Most of them are used for servos. There's a few that you might want to use for inputs or outputs, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, the next slide, please, Jonathan. Okay, on the next slide on the program, you can give a name to each servo. On the left-hand side, you can, like, they have them named here, left arm, right arm, so forth. You can define whether you want it to be a servo or whether you want it to be an output or an input. You can define how far you want the servo to operate back and forth. What you want it to do when you first start it up, how fast you want it to operate, and how much acceleration you want it to have. So all very useful. And as you can set up any number of screens like this. There's on the bottom left-hand side, the thing that says save frame. So you can plug in several servos. You can put them in different positions, save the frame, put them in another position, save the frame again, and continue to do that any number of times. The next screen, please. Jonathan. Next screen, please.
Yep. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Then you can, so for each...
Jonathan was off doing chat there, Fred. He was answering lots of questions in chat, and he had to figure out how to get back to the Zoom screen. Sorry about that.
No problem.
By the way, for everybody, that's why we have a producer and a moderator. It's because it gets really hard to keep track of what you're doing on the computer when there are two different things on different screens you've got to do and kind of keep track of them. So back to you.
So for each time you save a frame, it creates another frame name. So you could have like a character that moved back and forth and another character moving back and forth, and you can set those up so that they can move in any sequence you want. And then you can name each frame, give each frame a name and define how long you want it to last. So there's a frame name and there's a duration for each one. And you can set up a whole sequence like this. As I say, I mean, it could be, I don't know how long it could go, but quite a long sequence if you wish. You can, and this is how simple it is. There is no programming at all. You don't need to know anything about programming. I know practically nothing about programming, and I was able to do a fairly complex sequence of events. You can test it by pushing the play sequence button. You can rename it. You can set up different parameters for it. And then you can go in, in the top right-hand side, there's a button that says new sequence. And you can go into that and create as many additional sequences as you want. So you have a series of frames in each sequence, and then you can have a number of sequences. So the thing can get very, very complex if you wish it to. For most of what we would do, we probably, you'd probably have just a few sequences, but you never know. Now, if you want to go further with it and control it with an input or receive an output from it, then you can copy the sequence to the script, and that puts it into a programming mode. The company offers a very well-written manual on writing the programs. So if you wish to put them in a programming mode and operate it by inputs, that's available to you. Jonathon's gone quite a bit further with that part of it, and I'll let him cover that. Programming still is quite new to me and quite uncomfortable, so I do most of what I do with just the normal sequence without using the program. Jonathan, can we have the next slide, please? Here's a cuckoo clock that I made some years ago, and I'm showing it just so you can get an idea of, this has like 14 servos in it, and it's all run by just the basic program. There's no written program in it. Can you make it operate there, please?
Yep.
Thank you. So there's a cuckoo bird that comes out, and then a winch drops a load of lumber down. And this winch that's dropping the lumber down is a continuous rotation servo. So it drops it down. Now the servo starts, the other workers start to work in there. You can see people hammering and sawing in the window there. And this guy's planing a board. And then there's another guy over here, well, hanging onto the window, but another guy over here planing a board. And the guy in front cutting a board with a power saw. And there's music that's playing in the background. You can't hear it here, but there's music playing. And then the winch draws the wood back up into the window, and then the window closes. Well, this is all done with servos. I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out how to do this mechanically without servos. So this just shows some of the complexities that you can put into a device. So you get very creative on a train layout this way. Could we have the next slide, please? One of the things I did, I wanted to experiment with just closing a traffic gate. And so I made a little model here of my layout. On my layout, I have 3/4 inch plywood covered with 2-inch foam. Then I mounted a traffic gate on top of it and a servo board down below it. And then right at the bottom of the screen, there's a little circuit board, and that's one of the smaller circuit boards, servo control boards. I think I said 12. I think it's 6 servos. Jonathan, do you remember? It's something like that.
Yeah, the one in this particular photo is a 6 servo controller.
Yeah,
They come in different
that was
sizes.
the 6. So you could, in this case, I had 2 traffic gates for each side of the road. So I used 2 channels for the 2 traffic gates. Then I used 2 channels for inputs. And so I was able to, on my computer program, I was able to just close the relay. And when the relay closes, it actuates the gate and draws it down. And then I actuate a second relay, and that causes the gate to come up. The next slide, please. Now here's a yeah, run it, please. Oh, here the train's approaching, so the traffic barrier goes down. I added some LEDs onto it to add a little flare to let it flash. The train passes through, and when it's done, when it's passed through, then the gate opens again. A fairly simple little program, but it shows one of the things that you can do with little servo motors. The same thing I saw on an article some years ago. It was printed where a guy had a bulletin board, and he had people applying a new bulletin onto this bulletin board with the servo motors. So there's a lot of clever things I think you could do. I had one more. Jonathan, could you go to next slide, please? Here's a little entertainment area, and these are all run by servos. These are all continuous rotation servos, but each one has a separate servo, so you can run one ride a little bit, it can stop, it can run another ride a little bit, then another one can stop, so it can keep like the Ferris wheel. You notice it stops to let passengers off and on, and while the other ones are starting and stopping. And this is all done. There is no written program to this one at all. It's just a matter of operating those sliders, and then saving each step in this that you've set up. So those are some of the things I've done with servos, and I'll let Jonathan go into a little more depth in what he's doing.
Okay, so very similar. I had a box of, like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, a bunch of servos, and I'm starting my layout, and I wanted switch machines, and I've looked at commercial products like Tortoise and all that, but I was scratching my head saying, I've got all these servos, I'm not going to use them for model airplanes per se. What could I do with them? So I built, and this is my little test bed. I thought I'm going to, you can buy products that use servos for switch machines, but I'm going to build one just because. And so what I ended up doing is, unlike Fred, who used that servo control board, I used an Arduino. So if those who are familiar with Arduinos, they're just a little embedded programming that have actually a whole bunch of libraries for servos. And so what I wanted, and part of the other motivation, I had the servos, but all of the products didn't do what I wanted. I wanted an LED that would change colors based on the track, and then I wanted a simple wooden push button, and I push the button, it switches one way. I push the button, it switches the other. That's as simple as I wanted, and I wanted the LED to change colors. And then of course I wanted the slow motion. So I'll go through in a quick video here. Is you push the button, and then if you can watch closely, the track slowly moves. And then, you know, the LED is flashing saying it's changed directions and changes to red. Push it again and it goes back the other way. A very simple, all slow motion. It also is takes advantage of my 3D printed. So I 3D printed the brackets to mount the servo and all that. Here's another view of the slow motion of the servo actually moving. I ultimately am going to hook up switch stands so the switch stand faces will actually turn. And so another reason why I wanted it to move nice and slow. Yes, you could do this with other products that are out there. I have the servos, and so I kind of wanted to use my servos. So let's talk about products. So this is the little board that Fred was using, the little Polo Servo Controller. It's very nice from the standpoint of you can hook up multiple servos, as Fred talked about. You can have inputs and outputs. You can set up your software. You don't need to know programming. You just use that interface and set that up on the board itself, and then it takes care of the rest for you. Here is a Walter switch machine that's servo-based. There's a lot of others out there. And then the Arduino is another way of doing this, and it's a little more advanced. Basically, what I ended up doing is, and you know, they have a sample program. If you're familiar with any type of programming, it's really easy. You just give a command and say, I want the servo in this position, and the servo moves to that position. And an Arduino can, depending upon which flavor you get, you can hook up to like 16 servos to them. And so I wrote just a little bit of code that gave me my single push button and then track position. I also wanted to dabble in PC boards, so I made my own PC boards and put the Arduino on that just because I wanted to learn how to do that. So how do you get started? Well, you can get servos from anywhere, Amazon, eBay, your local hobby shop. You can get servos for about $1 a piece. So not a whole lot of investment. You can also buy servos that are hundreds of dollars, so a huge range. Most of the servos I'm using are, you know, they're just cheapies, about $1 or $2 a pop. Then you need some type of controller. An Arduino is one. You can get one of those for about 13. Sorry, I was wrong. They can control about 12 servos. And then the Servo Controller that Fred was using, you can get the small one of that for around $10 off by Amazon or your favorite local store. And that's, you know, so the investment to get started isn't that much. And, you know, all of these controllers can handle more than one servo. So, you know, it's something to think about. So, you know, the question is, you know, what can you dream up with servos? How you can use them. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with them. And with that, I haven't been following all the questions. I'll put a plug in. If there is interest in more advanced of using Arduinos or PC boards or things like that, I'd be happy to do another talk on, you know, how did I go about laying out the PC board. The cost for doing PC boards is incredibly low now. You can get 5 PC boards for about $5. Sorry, $2. So 5 boards, $2. You know, so the entry cost is not much these days.
You know, Jonathan, you brought up an interesting point. I know, I think Seth and I don't know who else did a project a while back on Arduinos. I mean, it might be interesting to think about a clinic for us on that topic. Might also be an interesting topic for the summer. You know, and one of the cool things is, because these things are virtual now, you can actually share your screen when you actually go through the programming steps. I mean, you know, so it might be interesting to show people, how do you go find, you know, code for an Arduino that's out on the internet? How do you load it? How do you put it in and go through the process? Because I think, you know, for us, that would be a good project to understand what things are out there for railroaders in that space. Is that, and Seth, I know you did something like this a while back.
Yeah, I was just about to post the link to the project board, which actually had the very same grade crossing controller application that Jonathan described. You know, I first learned about these when they I think that pretty early in this, like maybe 7, 8 years ago. And, not to take anything away from what Jonathon is saying, because it's, we're looking at the same reality. I heard about this. Dave Falkenberg and John Plocker did a clinic way back when we were meeting at Boucher's school. So that gives you guys an idea. And I saw this thing and my first thought was grade crossing controller. It just screams grade crossing controller. And anyway, so that was the application we did. I'd be happy to dust that out and do it again. Although frankly, this is great, but that was a little more of a hands-on. I'd
Right.
also be happy to do the CAD clinic again if you guys want.
I'm kind of thinking, that I think that was great because that's something focused, but it might be good to just have a conversation around, what it's almost this confluence of things. It's that you can 3D print the stand now to mount the servo in, and if you need a specialized board for something, you can make a specialized board. And I'm wondering almost how do you bring those kind of it's almost like there are these things that used to all be unattainable that now are easily be obtainable. But when you bring the three together, it lets you do really interesting things. I mean, I thought the grandfather clock as a building on a layout would be brilliant. And Jonathon's now, he's showing us, here we go.
Yeah, there you go. So here's my 3D parts that I printed. So that is the servo mount that the servo drops in. And then it's got the centering hole in it right now. Then this is my switch bracket. So if you look at my board, there's my switch bracket, here's my servo piece, and then there's my PC board that I made. It's a typical engineer. I went over the top. This board is a multitasker. It can be a switch machine, or I can use it to drive animation and lights for buildings and stuff like that. So, great flexibility, and it's all DCC controlled. That was the other thing. I'm using NMRA and building up a bunch of automation code that, I've got 2 wires that I run to all my buildings, and control everything. But it's a combination of 3D printing parts as well as, connecting it up. So.
Right. And it seems to me it's bringing together kind of all of these things, the low-cost servos that come out of the other spaces, the low-cost control systems, either specialized or servo-based, combined with 3D printing, and then the capability to do these easy computer programming for everything that's become so much easier. It's an interesting thing to bring those together to say how that those together change the hobby. And you don't have to do all of them, right? You can do the 3D printing and the servos and do like Jonathon did and do the simple programming. And for automation of building, that may be the best answer. So I think it'd be interesting to think about over the next few weeks. How do you package that up in a way to say, this is kind of transformational? Because I think it is. I think the ability to print something physical and instantiate control with a servo run by a computer. I mean, the idea of being able to open the door and Jeff Bunza has been doing some clinics on Saturday afternoons at Jim Kello's New Tracks, where he's been showing some animation, the same thing. But it hasn't been, I don't think, as detailed as you guys have been about the way you can get the components to do that. And that would, I think, it's making it approachable.
Yeah, and there's some questions in the chat about does a computer need to be connected? And the answer is no. You can absolutely, set the scripts and things up that, it takes input from little switches or whatnot and do it on its own. And so the having to have a computer not required to run it. Obviously to program it and set it up initially, yes. And then on the PC boards, yes, JLC PCB is actually where I've been getting my orders for PC boards. And they've been running a special for, 5 boards, $2, $10 shipping.
And Seth, I think you also did a clinic on kind of using software to design how to design the boards.
Yeah. I did a clinic on EagleCAD once or twice, and again, would lend itself very well, actually better, as you were talking in future planning, better to this format than in person.
See,
Yeah.
I love kind of clinics like where you have, so I'd be great, Seth, for you to talk through maybe the programming and do a demonstration of the program, talk about it. And then Jonathan, maybe together, or Jonathan, you talk about how do you get boards made? You know, how do you find the what's the process you have to go through after you've got the design done? You know, the 3D
yeah, that's just part of the clinic. Sure.
Right,
It's
right,
easy,
exactly.
you know, and the good news is it's not very hard.
Yep.
You know, much like 3D printing has a stage at the back end called the slicer that takes the file and sends it to the printer. There's a thing called a Gerber file, which is, you know, the STL file of the PC board world.
Exactly.
And, you know, Eagle and KiCad, for that matter, have tools to modify the GURBs so that they deal with various manufacturers' processes. For example, I use a couple of Chinese suppliers, JLC and Seed, Seed with 3 E's. But some people use a guy up in Utah called Osh Park, who also does pretty good work. Kind of spendy, and the boards are a little crude, but anyway, you need to have a slightly different file to deal with them.
So guys, what I'd like to think about, and I'll make this a challenge to everybody on the coast. The way the summer program is going to work, there's going to be these 2 clinic rooms or clinic tracks, and they're going to be morning, afternoon, and evening. The morning are 3 clinics. If we suggested to Bruce, we'd like to do 3 clinics in a row, focused on the new technologies. So maybe one on 3D printing, one on boards, and one on kind of computer control of servos and other things, to kind of say, how can you use and kind of the idea is to, through those, think about how they relate. I mean, I think that could be a really interesting kind of block because I think there are a lot of modelers who like to use those things, but just don't know how to get started. And if we could make it so this is how you get started, this is how you do your first, you know, and for example, do something where the STL files get shared, links to the STL files, links to the Gerber file. Anyway, just think about it, and we've got time to do it, but I think it'd be a really interesting program. So
another thing to think about, and I've been pondering this, so I had, you know, when I was working, I taught a lot of classes, and we did hands-on classes. And, you know, and we did some of them you know, a couple of years ago through Zoom like this, where everybody had in their hands, you know, an Arduino or something like that. And then in a Zoom session, walk through together and say, write this piece of code. And we could do something more hands-on in a virtual format. So something to think about as well.
Yeah. The format really lends itself to that, because you can actually, you know, see the fine little vector graphics these programs are throwing up in a way you could never see on a big screen.
Exactly. Dave Gibbons has his hand up.
Yes. Well, first of all, the important thing, Seth, you realize that your head is blocking the locomotive in your backdrop.
Okay, Dave, points for where is it? Where am I?
I think you're in Canada. BC
That
Rail?
would be right, eh? Say again?
No, it's not BC Rail. It's somewhere near
Morant's Curve?
Morant's Curve? No, I'm just thinking more Revelstoke area.
A little east of there. It's on the Bow River in Banff National Park.
Right. Okay. Now, to the less important point, the thing is, some of us, maybe not all of us, are cheap, pardon the language, bastards. And so for me, I sit there, and right now on my first phase of my switching layout, I have a toggle switch and a tortoise, and it moves the turnout, it powers the frog, and to switch over to going to servos and boards and some, I guess some of these cards can, the servo drivers can take an input from a toggle switch, but I still have to tell the servo somehow how far I need it to move. It seems like where, you know, cost benefit, where are we at?
They're cheap. I mean, Mark's board is a little bit high because of the way we make it, but it's got the pots on board. So the adjustments are there. All you need is a screwdriver. The Pololu one, you do need, I think, to jack in with USB. If you look around on some of the usual Asian sources, you can probably find ones that are similar. But I mean, the point is that a tortoise today, if you buy it retail, is about 20 bucks, maybe 15. The servo, as John pointed out, you know, you buy them in a bag of 20, 2 of them will be bad, 18 are okay, so your unit cost is about $1.06. The bracket could be as simple as a scrap of 3/4 inch angle, and the controller sub 10 bucks, right?
So I'm just like most of us, kind of cheap, and so I did the cost analysis because I don't think it's maybe cost advantage to say, hey, I have a layout and I have all these tortoises and I'm going to replace it. That's ridiculous. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But in my case, I'm starting with nothing. And so I went through and said, well, I'm going to have about 20, 30, 40 switches at 20 bucks. It's like, ka-ching, that's a big chunk if you look at tortoises and all that. And so I did a back of the envelope paper type napkin. What would it cost me if I rolled my own? And I'm coming in at about $5 a switch. That includes the servo, the electronics, the cost of making the PC boards, because I'm buying in bulk. And so the cost dynamics are really low if you're starting from scratch.
But Jonathan, you didn't talk about the benefits that you're going to live a year longer because of all of the effort and thought you put in and stimulation you got of doing all that.
Exactly.
No,
Well,
there's one more advantage too, and that's that you can do far more complex operations with a servo board than you can with the others, and you can have 2 or 3 things operating simultaneously.
Right, and I solved a lot of problems in code just because, and so for like, how do you set the limits and all that? I came up with an algorithm where I put in the servo, I put it in programming mode. There's a button on my PC board that says programming mode. The servo moves to center. I connect the center pin wire, and then I push the button and it travels to the left. When it gets to the maximum I want to the left, I push it again, it goes to the right. When it gets to where I want, I push it again, and it's now all programmed. So I don't need a computer or anything. It's kind of like this self-tuning. And so I don't have any hand, special things I need to figure out. I just look and push the button.
Hey, Jonathan, do you put are you putting your 3D designs for your components up on Thingiverse?
I should. It's on my to-do list.
Let me ask a question of everyone. So of the folks that have started doing this, there are places where people put things. So generally, if the 3D world stuff goes up on Thingiverse, I'm assuming that in the printed circuit board, there's a place for that. For code, there's a couple of code repositories. So we've been having a conversation on a separate conversation. Fred put some stuff together about trying to create a local resource file. I'm kind of wondering, is this something that the NMRA should be considering putting together a repository for model railroaders of different types of, so Jonathan, instead of putting them up, because the reality is a model railroad switch machine controller printout for a servo has no interest to anybody but model railroads. Putting up the general Thingiverse thing just means model railroads have to go there to find it. If we created something that said, here are 3D prints for model railroading, here are circuit boards for model railroading, here's code that people wrote for specific things for model railroading for different, whether it's a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino, is that a value that the NMRA should really be considering to bring to members? Because one of the things that strikes me is that we're always questioning where the values are. That could be a huge value for all of us.
Well, Phil, what they
Definitely.
what you could do is have a page of links. For example, almost all of my stuff is.
I don't want links. No, I want.
No. It's got to be links, Phil. It's got to be links.
Why can't we create a repository like
Thingiverse?
Thingiverse?
Because you'll end up with multiple copies of the source. Almost everybody who's serious about this has a GitHub page. I do, for example. And almost all the stuff on my site is linked to my GitHub page. Now, what that means is that if you use GitHub and I make a change, that propagates to your copy. So
Yep.
you automatically, or
Right.
you click a button and you update.
But
If
so
I have multiple sources, and I'm not going to put my stuff on NMRAs, I'm going to put it on my GitHub, and most
Okay.
people will do that also. So link to my GitHub, link to John's GitHub,
yeah,
and
the challenge is that links aren't searchable. So the problem is,
yeah, but you can
always,
do search, Phil. You can search within page.
no, I understand. Peace. I
I
understand.
mean, you know,
Enough said.
that's what works. Now I'll make an offer to everybody here. If you have an idea you want to share and you don't really want to be in the business of, you know, dealing with shipping and sales tax and all that crap, most of my stuff is contributed. And, you know, contact me offline. We can put this up. I've done a number of things like the Keep Alives, which are, you know, just club projects in my mind. But we can offer that.
Right.
Again, I'll place
cool.
that stuff on my GitHub if you don't want to be bothered.
So Seth, how would if we came up with a specific tag, like model railroad or something that was the tag that you put on things that you put on GitHub that were related. So what I'm trying to do is for example, when I go to Thingiverse, I have to try to find Jonathan's switch machine parts that he put on Thingiverse, just like somebody who comes to GitHub has to find your code block. And so it might be interesting to think about how do you put some tags on those when you store them in those tools? Because generally there's a place to put tag fields. And if we could put tags on things, so now what we can have is we can explain when you go, you got a link that says, here's GitHub. When you get to GitHub, search on these fields to find model railroad projects and these kind of tags. So
I believe they already exist, Phil. There's a thing called an info file, which is a fairly standard GitHub designator that does have a tag field. And I share my tags with John Plocker as a site called SP Coast, which I strongly recommend. And I'll paste both of those into the chat. You know, we share those so that, you know, you can find either of our stuff and we don't have to have, again, 2 copies and things getting out of sync.
Right.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
there are good tools for that.
Well, to me, what's missing, because I spent a lot of time, you know, when I was doing the Servo Controller, looking for what's out there, because I didn't want to have to write something if I didn't have to. And what's really missing is consistency of how to search for things. Right. And I totally agree with, you don't want to have multiple copies. There's, you know, GitHub and Thingiverse and all that. But where I think our group or the NMRA can do a better job is coming up with a set of standards of how to tag things. Because right now, you know, you try to search for switch machine and it's challenging to say the least. Right.
I think creating a set of tags, that's an offline subject we'll take. So any other questions on servos? Let's get back to servos.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? I went and looked on Amazon and I found, I think it was 10 for $17.99 as Amazon's best rated. So that's $1.80 each.
Yeah. The prices changes all the time. eBay, you can find them on eBay.
Well, I'm sure you can get them cheaper, but that's kind of the easy way to go find them, and it's kind of reliable, and they come in 2 days. So. Right. Cool. Well, with that, we'll jump on, and thanks, Jonathan and Fred. Really appreciate that. I think it's great. You know, it's an interesting thought, says a lot of us complain about not having room to do the modeling we want to do. And I think automation is an interesting way to do more modeling in the room you have. You know, it becomes a really interesting project to think about, you know, that depot you built 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What if you made it so the door of the depot would open and the freight attendant would come out and then go back in and the door would close? So how would you do that? And that becomes a really interesting project. So, and clearly you've got some experts you can query on that if you need help. So we'll jump back to anything we'll jump from our kind of formal to anybody have anything they'd like to share?
Oh yeah. Let me
Okay, wait, Seth first.
1 second here. Let me turn my background off. Sorry, bye Canada. So let's see. Can you see that? This is a bare board with just the servos mounted, but this is a dual servo controller. So this is a, just as we described, a PC board that I made that has 2 servos, and it's designed to mount below the layout and control a train order board or a dual 2-arm semaphore. And we're having a 3D bracket made that will hold it in place. So this mounts under your layout, and the 2 operating rods for the semaphore come down and are connected to these horns. And this is an Arduino Nano, and over on the sides there are pots to adjust the position, for red, yellow, and green, and some buttons to adjust it while you're testing. So a little hard to see, but I should have this up on the site in the next couple of days. And just another neat thing you can do, certainly by using some bell cranks or just offboarding the servos, you could use it for a 3-position stub switch, which is a similar, application requiring some positioning precision.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Cool. Anyone else?
Gibbons here. Got
Cool.
something to put up if I can do this. Let's
Hang
see
on,
here.
let me see it. I don't know that I opened screen sharing up. Yep, I did. You can share.
All right.
You want to share?
Let's see. Desktop.
Yeah, just best to share your desktop. That way we see what you see. It's easiest. Yep.
Right. A little progress report for your amusement. Does everybody see a picture of a 16-foot long shelf layout?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. My lady's father, 89 years old, was thrilled to death. I managed to get to the point now where the 2 main lines, the ballasted tracks, are up, running on DCC, put locomotives on there, handed him a control. He was thrilled to death to be able to just run engine back and forth. And my lady had an engine, I was driving an engine, she was driving another one using NCE DCC, and it was just so great to see the happiness on his face. He's dying to, you can see the industrial trackage here that comes off the main, and he's just dying to get to the point where we've got cars on there and can start to do switching and stuff, and it's really been a pleasure to offer that to him. The jacks are there for plugging in the throttles, but I'm also using radio control. Now the reason I'm pestering about, the using servos and stuff is I've got 5 tortoises under the main line right now, but in the future when I build the big dreamed layout, I want to look to see what the options are going to be. But I'm just really happy to be able to move forward on this. The other thing that's new for me is up above you will see a long white light. That's not a fluorescent lamp. That is a inexpensive 8-foot long LED light. I got 4 of them for about $60, and now I can see what I'm doing on the table, and they're so light and easy to handle. It's a real pleasure to use LED lighting now. None of us will say anything about the terrible shadow on what's going to be the backdrop, because the garage door guide rail is where it is, and I'm probably going to paint a set of dark clouds there and pretend like the shadow doesn't exist. Anyway, hand-laid turnouts using the Fast Tracks thing. And Phil, I'm still game to do, I think you said there were some people interested in watching somebody use the Fast Track system to build a turnout. So I'm still game for that someday if interest is still there.
Send,
Yep,
send
that
me,
was me. This is Jonathan. I'm the one who's interested. I have the
So-
fast track set up and need some help.
so David,
Okay.
David,
Yes,
shoot
sir.
me an email. You just shoot me an email and reply to the email you get from me, the Coast one. You got my email address on there. Just shoot me an
Yeah.
email and let's get it. Because so anyone who wants to do something, just shoot me an email and we'll just, I've got kind of a little thing of schedule. So for 2 weeks from Saturday, I'm looking for something. So why don't we do a fast tracks demo
Right.
2 weeks from
Phil,
Saturday?
you should see in your email stack something from me already.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
By the way, the problem is my email gets sorted by Microsoft into 3 files. The first is kind of what they say focused, and then they have kind of unfocused. And unfortunately, if you end up in the unfocused, sometimes I don't see it. And even if you end up in focused,
We're
too
in the
many
third
emails.
bucket, Phil, that's lower down called model railroading.
No, the junk. Normally, those don't get in the junk email because it actually turns out. What's interesting about for everybody is because I send out those Coast Division emails, Microsoft thinks I send emails to all of you fairly regularly. So you're all important people to me.
Right.
So it generally they get up there. It's probably more I missed it just because
Right.
too many emails going by.
Let me answer Matt Patach's question here. I'm caught, Matt, because if I move the LED, it's easy as anything to move those LED strips. They weigh nothing. It turned out I've got wooden blocks that it's tied to here with plastic wire ties, but the ones you don't see in the middle of the garage, I just got a wire tie where you have a tag at the end where you put a screw through, and I just put 2 of those into the studs and hang the light like that because they weigh so little. So yes, I could move it easily, but then the problem is that the light would be coming from behind the rolling stock. And I'd rather have more light on top of and on the front of the rolling stock than coming in on the back. So I'm sort of caught there because I can't take apart the garage door for obvious reasons. And okay, so I see some people are interested in fast track. Phil, you and I can discuss offline details. That's it for me, folks.
For some reason Zoom didn't want to let me mute. Yeah, why don't we'll shoot for 2 weeks from today.
All right.
And we'll, I mean, the challenge, the biggest challenge I think there is going to be how to film it in a way that makes sense. So we'll have to, you and I'll have to talk about
Yes,
how
sir.
to do that.
I've got some ideas. We'll try them out before the day.
Yep. Excellent.
And no, those tools on there are not part of the scenery.
So the one question one thought would be, you might want to think about building off of the table at either end, right up off the legs, and then run something across that would be under the garage door with another light that would light the whole scene from a lower level.
Well, the light that's in the center of the garage provides some front light, but standing there operating, you would be shadowing it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to worry about it too much. I've got a lot of other things I think I'll be coming on. By the way, this whole wall, see this, I got an idea from some model railroading publication about using blinds to hide a window. So the blinds are painted in the final color. I've got a gallon of paint to paint the whole wall and then we're going to put some sort of low, first pass will be a low silhouette of a town behind the buildings and stuff we put up on the tracks that are where all the tools are now. But, and the refrigerator will get a piece of foam core, which will get painted in some sort of backdrop, and then just out of the scene to the left is the dryer and a set of old wooden shelves cabinet that also will be sort of painted in to blend it in the backdrop. But it's coming along.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm dropping off sharing. Or you can unshare me, I gather.
Yep, yeah, I did. Folks have to go figure out where it is, and I'm able to do it, so it's a lot easier. So, excellent. Anyone else?
Next victim.
Hey, Phil, I don't know if anybody's interested. I did a presentation to a civic group yesterday morning, and it was a PowerPoint, but it started off with just a 5-minute video of trains running on my layout, and I thought it came out pretty well, and I was just wondering if you'd like to see it.
I absolutely.
Okay, so if you go share screen, give me that.
So
And since it's got sound,
click on the sound, and since I think you have pretty reasonable video or bandwidth, don't click on optimize video, because I've found generally that the video quality is better if you have good bandwidth if you don't do that. So go ahead and just try sharing it. Just click on optimize sound. And then if you click on either share your desktop or the video screen and share that, we'll see it.
Okay, and let me know if you can see what's going on here.
Yep, there we are.
Here we go. Can you hear that?
Absolutely.
Okay, now I've lost the video. I don't know anyone else.
I want to turn the volume down a little, Jesse. Okay, now slow it down real good because we're bouncing around too much.
Yeah, I noticed that. a little bit at 15, but I
That's right.
because you can see it better than I can. And goodbye for now. And somehow or other, that's it.
Cool.
But yeah,
Cool.
and this,
Thanks for sharing.
I can't get rid of this screen. I don't know. I don't know if
You're gone. I took it down. I already took it down. No worries.
Okay.
That was really cool. That was excellent. The one
Yeah.
thing I noticed, there was a question about video depth of field, and I also noticed there was an interesting when you had the South Pacific Coast car behind the train moving in front of it. I don't know if anybody else knows. Then there's a gap in between the cars. You can see the camera change focal distance between the cars in front and the car behind, and you actually could see the Southern Pacific if you watch it. So I asked Jesse to send it to me, and I'm gonna try to put it in here actually directly from the video and the thing I put up on YouTube, so that instead of being the Zoom recording, I'll take what he has and put it directly in. But it was really interesting to look at. How did you record it?
Well, basically with my partially with my iPhone and partially with my what we used to call my 35 millimeter camera. As you can tell, I don't do that for a living.
Yep.
And it was on a tripod, so they're jumping around. But I did. I was very pleased by it, and the people that I showed it to. There was that group of folks that organization that I belong to. They wanted to see model railroading and what there was. So there's a half-hour PowerPoint presentation about, pieces of model railroad and how you build scenery and et cetera, et cetera. But this started it off, and I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it. And before I put it away, I thought I'd share it one more time, because once I save this file, it'll disappear. I'll never find it again.
Like I said, I'll get you to send it over to me. We'll figure out how to do that so I can get it in a good high quality, so it'll be there for posterity.
Oh, this would be wonderful.
And by the way, if anybody takes a video of someone wants to share it, that's great. I actually pinged Joyce about doing something with the video she has of her layout and then talk about it, because 5-minute videos are not bad for us to watch. If it's a half-hour video, I think it's better to send it out ahead of time and have people watch it ahead of time, then we can talk about it afterwards, or during our meeting. So anyone else have something they'd like to share? Actually, let me share something real quick before. So Jesse brought up a really good point, and actually when we start thinking about recording things, as Dave and I are talking about, I found a toy, and I am going to spot me. Oh, hang on, I have to remove. There we go. Okay, so I bought this. Hang on, I got to turn off my virtual background. I'm sorry, you can't do any of this with a virtual background on it. Doesn't understand the difference between this and what's behind me. So I bought this on Amazon. This is an iSteady. It's actually called an Easy Cam. And so what you do with this thing is you put your smartphone into it like this, and you kind of press it down in, and then when you get done on the back here, you notice you want to kind of get it exactly centered in that little holder. And then what I need to do is I need to get my phone started. Let's see if I can get my phone to open up. There we go. And this thing comes with an app. So if everybody can see there, it's called the Hohem app. And so it's trying to connect to the device. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the button and turn this thing on. Take a second. And you notice what it did was it came on and it asked me if I wanted to connect. And I say, sure. And this actually connects to the camera and controls it. And so you can actually, in this app, zoom and do other things. So what this thing does is it lets you first control the camera. So I'm moving the camera, and you notice I'm controlling what it sees. And then once you get it set, now as I move this, you notice no matter what I do, it's staying horizontal, and it's kind of following my motions, but it's following them slowly. So if you notice back here, it kind of goes slowly back and forth. And what it has here is you can control that motion. So you can have it so it only goes back and forth slowly, or if you hit this little button right here a couple of times, sure I hit it twice there, now it will do vertical follow as well. And you can actually lock it completely so it stays just in one place. So it becomes really cool. When I get done here, I'm just going to turn it off now. And you notice it just kind of dies, just a few servos. Now, I have to kill the app, because what I've found with this app is if you leave it on, it just searches Bluetooth forever and just totally drains your battery. So let me remove my spotlight here.
Hey, can you share the link to that or more info on that?
I'll put it in the
really
link.
Cool.
Yeah, it was 80. I think it was 79 or 89 bucks on Amazon. So hang on, let me go back to the gallery view, and that should take me off. And I'm going to find a little video and share it, because what I did was I took that and I set it up where the phone, when I started it up, the phone actually, you can set it up so it's like this. And I turned it around so the camera's on the very bottom. And so it's a vertical picture, but you can actually stick it into your layout and take movies in your layout like you're walking around. And it's a pretty cool, and this is the first shot at it, so it's not very high quality. Hang on, I gotta get into the right file here. And it turns out I have to open it with an app. I found a video app that lets me flip it up and down. But here, okay, so let me share my screen now. I apologize for taking that long to get that set up, but. So I'm not going to share the sound because there's really no sound in this. So I'm just going to share the image. So basically this is again, with that turned upside down. And the thought process was, we normally have these views of a layout, which is either just picture from a distance, but with this, you can kind of almost get down. The thought was you can get down into the layout and actually kind of almost have a walking around view of being in the layout. So it's not the view you get on the train when you put a camera on the train, but more, what is your village? Now, one of the things you'll notice is I'm actually banging into things here because it's not as narrow as I'd like, but it gives you, and then you can see the cobwebs. That's the effects of COVID. So anyway, I thought it's kind of an interesting piece, and I think if you do any rail fanning, might be a great way to do rail fanning. It also comes, I'm going to stop sharing now. It also comes with a base. And one of the other things it does is the app actually will do both face and object tracking. So you can pick an object out and tell it to track the object, and it'll move the camera to follow the object. And one of the things I'm really interested in trying is, it has on the bottom of it the standard tripod thing. So getting a mid-sized tripod, coming back, David, to how we do a demo of, think about this, you just center this on your desk, and all of a sudden you've got, and these cameras are really good in these. I bought an iPhone SE because I like a smaller phone, and the camera in it is really a pretty good camera. So for those kind of things, it's probably got as good focal distance and field as most cameras you can buy.
I'll be using my iPad camera. I have a tripod and small holder and have set up so I can get a close-up of the fixture as we do the work.
Yep, and you're getting that foot by 1 foot, they do great at that. I mean, you got to think about it. You're using them to take a picture of a check to cash it.
So if folks are interested, I could share, it's not a train thing per se, but I 3D printed a paint shaker. got tired of always having to shake all my model paints and whatnot.
That seems to me to be, my reaction when Jonathan said he could do that seemed to be that was an essential, an essential necessity.
So that's my little paint. I just printed this like 2 days ago. Let's see if I can focus. So I don't have it like wired in, but as I drop it, and you know, the nice thing is I have the motor, and so it just does its little shaker, and it's got a nice little clamp to put onto your desk or table or whatever.
It looks like you're getting ready to do a model of an HO scale amusement park ride.
Wow, I tell you, that is a great motion. If you put that in and turned it up the other way, you're right. You could build some sort of a cool looking ride out of that very quickly.
Yeah, and so, you know, you just take my paint bottle, and it's got, you know, it's a clever design, little rubber bands, and you just slide it in, you twist it, and it holds your paint in there. And then you turn it on, and it does that nice, you know, get you sick motion. And so I can't take credit for the design. I did not design this. I did reprint a motor bracket for it because I didn't have the motor that the person who created this had. So I built my own little motor bracket. But yeah, it took me about an hour to print it, 2 hours maybe. And I got myself a nice little paint shaker. So things you can do with 3D printing to help the model trains, you know.
Can you throw, do you have a link to that? Was that like a Thingiverse print or?
Yes, yeah, let me grab the link.
Throw the link in the chat. I threw the link in the chat for the gimbal from Amazon. And I think I talked about these once before. I actually bought, show this. This may be of interest. Again, it's very heavily model railroady. So I'm building this O-scale building. Well, first off, show one thing I did. This is actually the roof of the balcony for the building. It's printed as a series of 3D prints that are epoxied together, and then it'll be covered with basically some simulated metal roofing. So when you look at the model and look up underneath, you'll see all the wood detail. For that building, one of the things I'm doing on the interior was I wanted to have wall sconces. So I'm actually printing a, let's put it up there, you can see it, a wall sconce. And the light that's in it are these lights, and I bought a bag of these. Open them up, so getting the bag open is the challenge. I didn't do that beforehand. So these are those 6030 LEDs with wires. So basically inside of this little sconce, there's a little tiny LED, and it just pulls down in there. And I'm going to hit it with a dot of ACC after I paint it to hold it in. And then this will go through the wall and be wired down. The inside, on the other side of the wall, you won't be able to see. But I bought 50 of these, I think, for 19 bucks. So, you know, it's very interesting. It's easy to have 10 lights in a model, which leads you back to the idea of an Arduino or some sort of light controller in your model. So you have sequencing in your model and lights. So I think that's a pretty interesting interesting product to look at, and also the concept of how you print it.
I've been working on, since Dave had cautioned me about using plexiglass for my water. You didn't want to see the, my video's off. I don't know why are you turning off my video, Phil?
No, the reason it's turning off is you have uplink bandwidth issues. And when your bandwidth, so we're actually hearing your voice, and when you lose packets like that, what Zoom does is it turns off the video to try to protect your audio. So that's what happened there. Before your video went off, your voice went away. Anyway, go try it and we'll see how it works.
Any event, I think that what Dave was cautioning me against is that if you have plexiglass and it's as thick as what I'm showing you here, this edge would be what he was thinking, that you would be able to see this tunnel type thing. But I have several areas where I have water, and I was in Tap Plastic, and I happened to notice they sell this frosted type plastic. And I also saw some plastic that simply had their tape backing on it. This tape backing is such that it gets to be pretty opaque. And what I, in my demented state, decided that if I had several layers, some of which were painted, and my landmass or shoreline was back some distance, this is so thin, you aren't able to see underneath. I haven't decided I'm actually going to use it yet, but on one area, I have a stream, and the stream is only about 10 inches wide. And it goes maybe 14 inches away from the viewer before it makes a turn. There goes my video again. It makes a turn and you can't see where it disappears. So anyway, I'm just considering if in a small area, using some plexiglass might be a quick way to get some realistic water. And this is before I put any water effects on the top. Like, you know, if the water were moving or whatnot, some rocks and things like that. Anyway, though,
Cool.
just an idea that's going through my small brain.
That's great. The nice thing about plastic is that the plastic like that is that it's kind of pre-installable once you figure out how to do it right. It takes care of itself.
And that rough finish will hide that problem where you could look underneath the edge of the land where the water came in. That rough finish will hide that.
Yep, exactly.
This is John, Phil. I just want to say, Jonathan and Fred, that was a great showing. I developed on my club layout, I built a ski hill, and I want to power the chairlift. Trying to figure, I got a little motor. I did a mock-up, but it runs too fast. But I think the servo and the Arduino, that answers my question to turn down the speed. So thank you very much. I'm going to try to incorporate it in that and where to get it. So
You're welcome.
question, how am I going to do it?
Well, and plus,
Yeah.
John, now the real challenge is how do you make it slow down a little bit every time one of the chairs goes by the load point so that it actually kind of simulates a change in motion? That would be the real interesting challenge.
Bill, you are just evil. You know that?
No, but it's just, it's kind of interesting. The thing that makes, so here's the thing that makes Fred's thing so interesting, right? It's not that he powered the carousel with the servo, but that he thought that he actually mimicked the different motions, right? So the spin around thing spins for a while, and then it stops for a while, and then it spins for a while, and it stops for a while. But the carousel moves away, stops, moves away, stops, moves away, stops, and then may go around for a while and then repeats that moving around process a bit. And, you know, the idea of being able to simulate motion so it's more realistic is, I think, you know, a pretty interesting, you know, concept, and can make a small model. I mean, if those are modular models, to me, animation is the next opportunity. You have limited space, so you use animation to create more interest and value. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, what I'm going to do right now, it just be continuously running at a slow speed. It's not going to show in the loader that maybe down the line, I figure some way how to detach.
No, you need, John, you need a second servo to control a figure that falls down while getting off the ski lift. And then the ski lift comes to a screeching halt until the attendant can get them out of the way. And then you restart, you know, because
Yeah, like I
that's
said,
what always happens to me.
just getting it to work like that, then later on, they'll figure out, yeah, I could do that.
And John, the right answer to me was, well, Phil, I'm actually modeling the 60s, and back then chairlifts didn't stop.
John,
in the
they're just
60s,
yanking your
Phil,
chain,
when I
okay?
was growing up, we had tow ropes.
Yeah, you have the total.
And-
No,
I
And you
started
mean
with
he's
no.
the
I
guy who's
started
lost
with,
his footing and is getting dragged up the hill on his belly.
I've got. I don't know if you can see it. That's the picture of it.
Oh,
oh, cool.
Oh, that's great, John. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Well, when you get the servo mounted, you need to take pictures.
I
when you
will.
do
I'll
the
take a
project.
video of
And
it.
well, no, but take some pictures as you do the project. Kind of, one of the things is anytime you got these phones have capability of photograph. When you do a project, just take a lot of pictures of it because then you can put them together and tell people what you did.
Yeah, I have.
I mean,
like I said.
Cool.
But the idea. Thank you, Jonathan, for the servo idea. I think that'll solve it, and it cheaply too. You're right.
And we'll have John back on to talk about how you power your chairlift in a few weeks.
This is Dave Gibbons to Joyce.
Yes.
Joyce, I wanted to thank you so much for the charming video you did of your garden railway. That was a very nice one. Thank you.
I didn't do it. Thank you, but the National Garden Railway magazine sent a special professional videographer out to my house, and he spent days setting up the lighting and getting special cameras and doing the music, my band, and so
John Cushman.
yeah, and so that it was done professionally. It wasn't done by me, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Did you listen to my band playing train songs? Good. My band is going to do a recording just of train songs when the COVID ends. But so far we are sheltering in place. So, and you asked earlier about opinions. I love Zoom. I feel so safe on Zoom. I've had a number of my friends die from COVID, and even young friends get it and be very sick for a long time. So these new variants, be safe, everybody. It's pretty scary out there. And I had a question, please, for Phil. You said something about my video, I think.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, why don't we next week? So David's going to do a talk and go through building a switch motor or a turnout using fast tracks. Why don't we, after that, we'll do like we did today. We'll go ahead and play your video. And then after that, talk a little bit about your railroad. If you've got some pictures of things you'd like to say, well, this is something I'm really interested in. Kind of the really cool thing about videos is you can watch the video and then the owner can talk about it. And if you have a couple of pictures, you can show pictures. Everybody's kind of seen the layout and you can now kind of ask questions intelligently about, so why don't we do that? We'll plan on 2 weeks from today. David's going to do the fast tracks demo. And then after that, Joyce, we'll play your video and have a conversation. You can have some conversation about what you've built. We all have that garden railroad itch this time of the year. So it's probably time to scratch it without actually spending any money building anything.
I'd love to do that. Unfortunately, I'm a master gardener, and I'm teaching Spanish speaking. I'm Spanish speaking, so I teach classes in gardening for beginners. And that Saturday, I'm teaching that morning. So I'm wondering, I'm free next week. You said 2 weeks, right?
Well, yeah, we're either 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now.
4 weeks.
Yeah, because we're every other week, so.
Okay, we can work this out between.
Yeah, why don't you just send me an email? We'll figure out the right time then. That's good.
That sounds good. And I don't know, somebody said they were a musician. Paul, oh, he's gone.
That's me.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Feel free to send me an email. I'm at metronome7, the number 7, at AOL.com. And anybody can send me an email, metronome7 at AOL.com.
Okay, great. And naturally, I know how to spell metronome, so no problem.
Yes.
And Joyce, you can just type your email address into the chat and send it to everyone. That way they can just copy it out of the chat. And for those that don't know how to spell metronome.
Okay. Well, Google will tell you.
Yep. While I'm here, I have a quick follow-up for Bob Moore's note about using a plexiglass. I put up on my background, this is my port module, and underneath the ship, I've used that ripple glass and layered it underneath with a layer of blue, translucent. And then there's about another inch or so below that with a reflective bottom. And when you look at it, you may not be able to tell it from this picture, but when the light shines through it, it makes a little bit of a kind of a shadow underneath, so it looks like there's some depth to the water.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with the way that worked out. I wanted to have a solid surface because I do change the ships out in and out occasionally too. So I wanted to have a surface I could do that with.
Yeah, that encourages me to think about this plexiglass idea. For one of my areas, I have a huge amount of river. It's about, I don't know, 30 inches deep. But it's a very rocky type waterway. So anyway, so yeah, I think that it may have some advantages somewhere, and it may be a part plexiglass and part of the poor epoxy thing.
Yeah, another thing you could do, you can do the plexiglass and then use like the real water effect stuff on top of that to get more white water and stuff and build on top of it.
So the other thing that might be interesting, if you're up against a pier like that, even if you use thick plexiglass, if you sand the plexiglass to the side and then use a torch and just heat it, it becomes translucent or transparent again. And if you've got that really thick 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch plexiglass, if you do that, you take the torch, you don't burn it, you just get enough heat on it, and it'll just, they do it as part of their process, it'll become perfectly clear again. If you did that on the edge, like on the ship there, but if you look at where the edge of the plexiglass comes against the pier here, if you see where my cursor is, if you actually made that clear first, made the pier extend down below the plexiglass, brought the plexiglass up against the pier, I'm not sure you couldn't see right through the edge and see the model material behind. And then if you had the next layer be darker, it would actually look like you kind of see a little bit, and then it became darker. So you'd actually see at the edge. Might be really interesting to try playing with something like that against a pier, against a solid wall pier like that.
When I start my experimentation, I'll take lots of pictures.
Excellent.
Yeah, sometime I can take a picture of this taken apart so you can see the different layers. And I may go back and do that polish on the edge too. That could help.
And I see a great servo animation project there standing in yellow.
Oh yeah, right. Now, that's a kit bash of a metal earth kit for a crawler, and I just added the tower underneath it. So, but yeah, and it does swivel.
Yep. And if you just put a wire down through and underneath and put a servo, and you can swivel it back and forth and have the container go up and down. So it goes up, it goes down, comes up, swivels, goes down, comes up, swivels.
Yeah. You could probably make it drive along the track too.
Yeah.
I have a question driven by this picture. I see behind the crane a chassis. Is there any more reasonable prices for chassis than the Walthers extendable chassis at almost $10 a piece?
Are you talking HO? This is N scale.
In HO.
That's a Kato. I'm not familiar with what's out there for HO. But do some searching. There's got to be stuff somewhere. You might check Shapeways too. There might be some 3D prints that you can get.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Phil, I'd like to share.
Go for it.
So I'm really interested in Fast Track because I just figured out how to modify my, I got 5 Pico switches on my Occidental module. And I've been looking at all of the videos on YouTube about how to modify them and figured out that everybody's modifying HO scale Pico switches, and they don't look like my Pico switches because they're not the same. Pico's HO switches are different. They don't have the same spaces across all the ties where people were soldering. So I figured out how I'm modifying these which is different from what I've seen. And I'm going to modify 5 switches, and then I'm going to go to fast track for future modules. Cause I've decided if I'm going to put 2 hours into modifying each one of these, it's not worth it. I'd rather have the look of the fast track switches that let me have something different than a number 5 switch. So I'm really looking forward to, I'll get these down. These will be run with tortoises and Pico, but I expect that I'll do future modules in fast track. And I'm really looking forward to the next meeting. So I can check that out. I was just curious, how long does it take to lay down a fast track switch when you're practiced at it?
Let's see. Am I out talking?
An hour and a half.
It's a no-brainer.
Fast tracks claims 45 minutes. I think that if you work efficiently and produce 10 point assemblies and 10 frog assemblies, you might be able to bring the time down to around that for a turnout.
Yeah, I do. When I did it on the module, I did 3 at a time typically. So you do 6 points, and you do 6 of the frog. You do 6 frog assembly or 3 frog assemblies, and it typically took no more than a couple hours to do 3 switches. Once you get the and I by the way, I've got the number 5 jig set for the turnouts and the Y in ON30. So, and if somebody wants to borrow them and try them, it's fine. The challenge is if you buy the switch, the turnout, and the Y, and the point tools, and that the whole package is probably pushing $250, if not more.
I think a lot of us
Joe
have parts
Fugate
of the fast track setup.
Joe Fugate on Model Railroad Hobbyist has had a whole series of articles on how to do much less expensive turnouts using components from the from fast tracks, but also using like Central Valley switch underlays and things like that.
By the way, the first ones I did, all I did was printed the templates, and I put the templates down and glued down the ties on paper using some ACC. So you print the templates, and you get the templates, they're PDFs, you copy them. I copy them into PowerPoint, and I scale them in PowerPoint and then print them out. And what I was doing was basically taking that paper and pinning it down on a piece of foam and then gluing the ties on it, cut the ties, and then lay the rail on and solder the rail from the top. And you can actually make a turnout right on the templates. So if you want to try doing it without the templates, you can actually do that and make a turnout. The challenge is getting the points right.
Back to Bob's question about how long it takes. I think that 45-minute guesstimate skips over a lot of the quality checking. And I built about 10 fast tracks without doing that and put them on the layout. And I now have a lot of replacements to be done. I have learned since then. That's why my guesstimate was doing them individually takes me about an hour and a half.
Yep.
If I may, gentlemen, there's another thing to consider here, which I call the Craftsman Effect. In our club, in years past, we've had guys that are insanely good craftsmen and can work at a very high level of precision freehand. The tools, what I see with the fast track tools, it is a replacement for a super high level of craftsmanship. You still have to, as this gentleman points out here, you still have to be careful and do your quality checks and stuff, but you can get a good, acceptable result without being so freaking good and so precise. Especially, I don't know about you guys, my eyes aren't so good, my hands aren't so good. I can't do the work I did 20, 30 years ago. The fast tracks is allowing me to create good quality turnouts with quality checks, as you mentioned, but that to me is what makes it possible for me to make the turnouts I'm making, good running, good looking turnouts, without taking all the fun out of the hobby. It's letting me build turnouts, and it's a reasonable amount of effort and a reasonable amount of fun. I'm stepping off the soapbox.
We're model railroaders. We don't need no stinking craftsmanship.
Cool. So I have one last thing to share, and that was not from me. So this is Milton's car that I got. So I'm going to open it up. We'll see. I haven't opened this up yet. Of course, now the box wants to fight me like crazy. So this is the convention car that I ordered. So I thought you guys would want to see it, because if you want to buy one, you have to go buy one now. And of course, I'm sans a knife here to cut things. There we go.
This is an unboxing.
This is an unboxing here. So I'm being a very bad unboxer. So here's the container. You guys see that? Or the cargo, I guess is the right word. So this is the sugar pine lumber, and it got a little bend here on the, it turns out that the shipper did a good job throwing it around. So that's the car, and that's all cast. He actually, on TSG, the crew lounge on Sunday, he talked about building it and showed most of these castings, he actually uses a syringe to put the resin into the casting. So that's basically the convention car. So I thought that was pretty cool versus, you know, I had this one that someone had donated. So this is the 1965 convention car, which is kind of a basic roundhouse shaker box. I thought that building a kind of a custom resin car was a lot cooler. So I think there are going to be 4 more of those that he's going to make, and you can get if you want. And I'm an ON30 guy, so I bought that anyway because I thought it was cool. As it starts to roll away from me.
Phil, real quick, if you're not aware, today there is a virtual train show going on at trainshow.com. You can get on that. On the West Coast, it starts at 9. It goes to 4 o'clock today. There's a lot of things. It's free. You just register and it tells you there's presentations, tours, virtual booths, anything like that. Check it out if you're interested.
I think that's the virtual version of one of the East Coast train shows.
Well, it's the old Great Train Show and World's Greatest Hobby Show. I think they're all together doing a thing like this too.
Now, all of those train show people are now under one.
Yeah, they're all consolidated now.
Great train.
It's still pretty East Coast oriented too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the other guys, the Great Train Show is the only one that ever came out here. So maybe see what happens now.
And
Yeah, it's consolidated. It'll be interesting to see how it works.
Yep.
Bill, we're starting at 1 o'clock on our next training.
Yeah, the training for anyone who's involved in the PCR convention, you should have gotten an email from me for the 1 o'clock with links to everything, and we're going to meet in the main hall at 1 o'clock. So with the links that I sent you. So there was an email. It was actually an email. It didn't come from me. It will have come from the 2021 PCR convention. I think it's MR, for main room email account from Gmail. Which what we're trying to do is not use personal emails. I've been using mine. I'm going to stop for those things. For the summer, we're going to use all convention emails to try to get all the emails not to come from individuals, but from the convention. So cool. And by the way, if anyone's interested, doing this stuff and being a volunteer for this stuff is actually, as everybody can tell you, a lot of fun. You get to do some fun stuff, but you get to sit through all the clinics that you're volunteering for anyway, so you don't miss anything. Well, I think that kind of brings us to the end.
Could you resend that? I'm not sure I can find the right one in here. There's just so many emails about this.
Oh, okay. I will resend it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Certainly. Yep.
Take care, everyone.
Have a great week, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks, and we'll have a fast tracks demonstration in 2 weeks.
Later.
Have a good one. Bye now.
Good night.
Super. Thank you.
Bye now.